Hi, and welcome to this talk on self-compassion. My name is Alison Taylor. I am a research supervisor at UEL in London on the Master's Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology course. So today I want to talk to you about self-compassion, what it is, why is it so difficult to be kind to ourselves sometimes, and what we can do to help ourselves with that. Okay, so sit back and enjoy, and later on in the day there's plenary. If you want to ask any questions, then my email is on this screen. You can email me on this email address and I'll do my best to answer your questions. So so let's begin. So let's just start by just taking a quiet moment and then just listen to this poem and just notice what your reaction is. It's called Love After Love. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Now that's a poem by Derek Walcott. Another perspective here, it says, you yourself as much as anybody in the entire universe deserve your love and affection. Now that's a quote direct from the Buddha, and just shows that we're all equally deserving of love and affection from ourselves. So what is self-compassion? Self-compassion is having the same compassion towards yourself that you have towards others. Compassion for others is when you notice that someone is suffering and you are moved by their experience. Your heart feels for the suffering that they are going through. Compassion for others is not pity. It is about recognizing that everyone is human and imperfect. In a way, you are identifying with the person you see struggling. Self-compassion is about taking this feeling and turning it inward towards ourselves. So I don't know if while you were reading that, when you were listening to me read that quote, that you realized that actually so often in life we say things like, well, it's so much easier to be nice to other people than it is to be nice to myself. We often find that, we are our own harshest critic, and that we're more critical of ourselves in a way we would never speak to other people like that. So what's the problem with self-compassion? Well, it's not so much that people are uncomfortable with self-compassion. It's rather that when we feel self-compassion and we open our heart to receive it, that such compassion also opens the heart to the pain that may be there, like sleep in, that we maybe haven't given attention to for a long while. It may awaken old wounds that have not been fully acknowledged, grieved, or mourned. It opens ourselves to self-compassion, and that may feel threatening for the following reasons. Because all of us, when we have things that are feelings that are difficult or problematic, we try to kind of look away. We try not to pay them attention. We try to stuff them down with various things like food or alcohol or all sorts of just being really, really busy. As a way to just push down and ignore the uncomfortable feelings. But we can't only pay attention to part of ourselves. We find that when we open ourselves to self-compassion, that the whole lot has to be like a package deal. We have to take it all on. So it may compete with our view that self-compassion is weak, or it can lead to a slippery slope of being too forgiving of ourselves. Have you ever noticed a time thinking, well, if I didn't beat myself up over this, I wouldn't try? So sometimes it can feel problematic. It might be experienced as threatening to an inner dialogue founded on tough love, one that denies and minimizes the need for such compassion. We can say to ourselves, I have to be tough now. Perhaps I've been kind to myself in the past, and that led to an outcome that perhaps we didn't want. So we have to keep kicking ourselves forward to try and be tough on ourselves as a way to be loving. Now we notice with the phrase tough love that even though it's tough, the intention behind it is to be loving. So we don't want to, knock it too much. But on the other hand, notice that tough love does not feel great for the recipient, even if it's meant to be loving. We might decide that having self-compassion might be selfish or self-absorbed. Would I suddenly become selfish if I was to have compassion for myself? Would I ignore everybody else? Would I just become completely wrapped up in every moment about being about me? Well, I don't know why we think that, but that's one of the reasons why people find self-compassion problematic. We may feel that we don't deserve it. Why would I deserve to have someone be kind? As a consequence of these factors, attempts to evoke self-compassion can even arouse shame, with its powerful tendency to want to hide or disappear. And there's kind of a thing called positive toxicity or toxic positivity, in that we might feel that, if it's in our power and we don't do it, then that's just something else we've failed at. And so we might feel ashamed and not want to even try. So there are reasons why we find self-compassion problematic. But it is possible to overcome these problems. The more we understand about what self-compassion is, and the more we understand about being present with ourselves, the more we understand that these things are possible entirely to overcome. But also part of it, overcoming them, is acknowledging that actually up to a point they have worked. They have been protective in the past. So if I'm taking an exam and I'm frightening myself about how useless I am at learning something, that might motivate me to work harder. And in the end, I might find that I pass the exam. So in a way, some of our strategies, even though they were not kind, actually had a degree of success. And so that's why we tend to hold on to these things, because they kind of half work. Even though they don't feel great, they do partly work. But what I want to show you today is that actually you can achieve all those things that you want to achieve and still be kind to yourself. So here's another quote from, this time, the Dalai Lama. He said, "We can have high expectations of ourselves and how we should perform in every area of our lives. If we don't meet these aspirations, we can view ourselves as failing in some way. We often fail to see all that we actually are, exactly as we are, not perfect, but mostly good enough is absolutely okay." All right, so there you can see in that picture, the poor man carrying this weight of high expectations on his back and trying to get up the stairs. And that can be how we are ourselves, in that we can decide that we're not going to be happy with anything less than perfect. So right now, I want to do a little activity. Now, normally when I do this presentation, I do it in a room full of people, and we do it with talking to the person next to us. However, today we're doing a more novel online version. So what I want you to do is to just take a moment, pause the recording if it helps, and just consider this question. Am I a perfectionist? Yeah? What is perfect? Yeah, what do I mean by perfect? If I'm striving for perfect, what exactly is perfect? Okay, and how many of us are the last priority for ourselves? How many of us, the idea of perfect is putting absolutely everybody before ourselves in order that they think we're perfect because we're perfectly taking care of them all the time? Okay, so pause the video. And if not, if you don't want to do this, I'll carry on. Okay, so welcome back for those who have restarted. My definition of perfect was this. It was just a little bit more than whatever I just did. Yeah, just a little bit more than whatever I just did. Because actually part of being a perfectionist is part of knowing that actually if I was to say what I did was good enough, then somehow I wouldn't be a perfectionist anymore. So you're caught in this downward spiral of needing to be perfect, wanting to be perfect, but that perfect is just a little bit more than whatever I just did. So like that, we can never be enough. We can never be enough for ourselves. We can never be enough for what we think other people expect of us either. is always just that little bit out of reach. Because, and the reason for this is it serves us to do this because it keeps us motivated to keep trying. Okay. However, Siddhartha Gautama said, if your compassion does not include yourself, it's not complete. So that's something to consider. So why is self-compassion important? Just for a moment, imagine that we were a cup. Okay. We fill up the cup, we can then fill other glasses from our cup, and then we refill the cup because we're able to fill it ourselves. If we don't do this, then helping others becomes a sort of currency exchange as we fill their cup and then expect them to fill ours in return. So that then becomes problematic because you then become dependent upon what other people will give you for what you need. Now, there's a really big difference here between need and want. Yeah. Self-compassion frees us from needing others to reciprocate and allows us to be self-sufficient in providing the compassion we need. Okay. Now, it's nice to have other people pour into our cup for sure. And who wouldn't want that? But if you have self-compassion for yourself, you fill your own cup, then what everybody else can give to you is more than you need. So you have, your cup overflows. Okay, so then you're not needing other people to do things in the way that you want them to do it. It just is so freeing. Okay, so like that, understanding how to give self-compassion to ourselves is really important because then we can fill our own cup. Okay, so here we have another quote from Brene Brown. Self-compassion is key because when we're able to be gentle with ourselves in the midst of shame, we're more likely to reach out, connect, and experience empathy. So when something happens and you don't achieve what you want, and perhaps you might feel ashamed, if you're feeling self-compassion for yourself as opposed to self-pity, then in the midst of that shame, you're more likely to reach out. If you're feeling self-pity in that moment, you're going to shut down, isolate, withdraw, all of these things. But if you're feeling self-compassion, you're likely to reach out, connect, and experience empathy from others. So looking at the benefits of self-compassion, we learn to deal with the challenges of life and to thrive when life is less challenging. So if we can manage when life's really tough, then it's going to be a breeze when it's less challenging. It enables us to develop self-acceptance, which research shows improves our health and well-being. So it makes us feel happier if we're self-compassionate because we always have that feeling of being enough, of being worthy, of feeling that we're doing all we can, that we're doing our best and that's good enough. Okay, so that's good for your mental health for sure. But research shows that actually mental health and physical health are linked. So what helps our mental health also helps our physical health, and what helps our physical health helps our mental health. So self-compassion is actually really important. It deepens our sense of life satisfaction, even if our circumstances have not significantly changed. Now, that's a key piece because a lot of us feel that our satisfaction with life depends upon having nice people around us, nice house, nice car, nice possessions, nice everything, having the things we want that say good stuff about who we are. However, if we're giving ourselves self-compassion, even if nothing changes in our material circumstances whatsoever, we still feel that our life is a better life. Now, one of the principal researchers in self-compassion is a lady called Kristin Neff, and she's come up with this model of self-compassion, which, according to this picture, is the key to a happy life. And she said that there are 3 component parts to self-compassion. Self-kindness, which is being caring toward ourselves as we are to others. Yeah, remember what we said earlier about if compassion doesn't include ourselves, it's not complete. And this is what Kristin is saying. She says that we must be caring towards ourselves as we are to others. We need to recognize our common humanity and that actually suffering is that moment of connection with others, and that with mindfulness, being open to the reality of the present moment, means that we can acknowledge our suffering. We can be present with it without necessarily needing to fix it, to change it or anything. We can just say, okay, I'm going to sit with myself. I'm going to allow myself to pay attention to my feelings and not squash them. So this was her research, which we're going to look at in more detail now. So looking at kindness with oneself. Now, I totally want this umbrella that this lady has got, but there we are. I don't know where to get one. But anyway, kindness with ourselves. Self-acceptance is my refusal to be in an adversarial relationship to myself. This was Nathaniel Brand. And I absolutely agree that I will not be in an adversarial relationship to myself. So this means that I need to, on some level, learn how to have some self-acceptance. So here we are. It's another activity, which again is something that you can do. If you want to pause the video in a minute when I've explained it, what I want you to do is to just take a walk around your house and to just notice what you're thinking and feeling. Find yourself looking at all the things around your house and noticing and be aware of your thought processes. So I'm just looking up the instructions so I get the wording. Okay, here we go. That is not the one. Okay, no worries. Okay, so what I want you to do is to walk around your house and to notice how you're thinking, how you're feeling. If you meet someone else on your travels, then just don't necessarily, unless you have to, stop and engage in a big conversation with them, but just notice, do you compare yourselves with them? Notice how you think and feel about your interaction. Look at all your possessions around your home or wherever it is you are and see what you say to yourself about what that means about you. Okay? Now, just observe it for now. Okay, don't try and change it, but just try and turn up that volume on your self-critic, because actually the way to go forward with this is not to stuff that critic down, but actually to let it speak, to hear it, and to then reframe what it says. So what we can do is to then soften that self-critical voice and just thank it for telling us what it thinks. So if you see yourself looking at your TV and going, that's a really old TV. If I had a better amount of money, I could buy a better TV. I need to work so much harder because if I wasn't in such a loser job, then I would perhaps have better income and I'd be able to buy a better TV. And then that when people see my TV, they would know how great a job I have and how important I am. And, you know, all of these things that we can perhaps say when we're being self-critical. Instead, we can say, well, thank you, self-critical voice. Thank you for telling me what you think. I want to reframe that and to say, okay, thank you for telling me that actually at some point in the future, I want to consider changing up my employment. Yeah, or something like that, whatever. I happen to love my job, but that's just an example. Okay, so just try and find a way to thank the critic and to just reframe that observation made by your inner critic as to how actually there's a want behind everything. Yeah. So if your want is that you want to get better stuff because you want to earn more money, then great. Actually, nothing wrong with wanting to earn more money. So reframe your observation made by your inner critic. Okay. So if you want to pause the video and go and do that, and then just note down your feelings and your reaction about that. Okay, so just to back up that experience, I want to tell you about a research project that was carried out looking at whether replacing the self-critic with a self-soother helped to reduce suffering in a group of people with severe acne. Now, we've all had, you know, suffered with this at some point in our life, so I'm sure we can identify that all of us have had some degree of spots at some point that we didn't want. And some people really suffer with severe acne. So for 2 weeks, they were asked to read phrases that would acknowledge the critic but soothe the feelings. So it's, I feel upset about my acne today, and it's okay to feel this way. I would be accepting of my friend in this position, and I want to be this way with myself too. They also wrote themselves a compassionate letter. And what they found was that the intervention significantly reduced feelings of depression in the participants. And also, surprisingly, they found that the degree to which their acne bothered them, the stinging, itching, and burning, decreased too. So here's another activity that we can have. Just learning ways to be kind to ourselves, to just how to soothe our body in the middle of times that are challenging. Okay, so times when we perhaps would have launched that inner critic to perhaps do what this lady in the picture is doing, and to just hold ourselves. Perhaps go somewhere on your own to do this, otherwise other people wonder what you're doing. But to just hold ourselves and to just sit quietly, focus on the breath, and to just hold ourselves and to be calm. And then what you can do is, if you start with your hands at your shoulders, just slowly stroke the top part of your arms down to your elbows. You will find that this is incredibly self-soothing. It's a technique that is called havening and is useful for when you're feeling a little overwhelmed. So that's one thing that you can do, and try it. Now, not everything that I suggest today is going to be helpful to everybody, because we're all unique. We all have ways that we enjoy being kind to ourselves and things that we don't find unhelpful. So whatever it is that I suggest, if it's no good, then just drop it and try some of the other things. Okay. So how many times recently have we heard this phrase, we are all in it together? Yes, perhaps not all in it equally, but definitely we are all in this pandemic together. Now, the language of lack of self-compassion and lack of kindness has really come to the fore recently, hasn't it, as we've been dealing with coronavirus, because we've been taught to self-isolate if we think we're ill, or that we need to be shielded. So that idea of isolating and the potential for people to feel lonely within that, as opposed to feeling alone, has been heightened. Maslow, who's a humanistic psychologist, talked about the need to belong. And he said it was so important that he put it into his hierarchy of needs. So being in things as part of humanity has actually been identified as being really essential. I don't know about you, but I've found that recently in the pandemic that I've been talking to other people, and the first thing I'm asking them is, well, how's lockdown been for you? You know, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I could pick up some pro tips on how to improve my own experience of lockdown from other people, and for me to share things that I've found really helpful. So that need to belong, that need to feel connected to others, you know, how have we become so dependent upon the internet all of a sudden? And, you know, those Zoom calls and Skyping and, you know, Facebook even has become more essential in terms of actually connecting to other people. And I can't imagine dealing with this pandemic without the internet. You know, it has transformed the experience, for me at least. One of the key pieces, though, about self-compassion is that even if we're on our own, if we are if we're alone, if we have self-compassion, then at least we're with someone that we like, yeah, and that we're kind to. And that often loneliness is in some way a lack of self-compassion, because it's like being alone but not liking the person that we are alone with helps us to feel lonely, because in some way we're thinking we're not enough. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't also want to connect, so the two go hand in hand. But it's worth just noticing, if we're feeling lonely, then perhaps some more self-compassion for ourselves would help with those feelings. One thing that we also do is we compare ourselves to others. Tajfel, the psychologist mentioned in the next comment, has a theory called self-identity theory. And what he says is that we tend to identify with people who we feel are like us, and we tend to identify as not being like other people who we feel are not like us. So it's a kind of us and them situation, which actually gets in the way when we're looking at self-compassion, and it contributes to this illusion of perfection, that somehow there is perfection that can be reached. And when you take that to the extreme of racism and the idea that some races are better than others, this is where we really lack self-compassion and compassion for others. Because there's a theory called the interconnectedness. And that is actually that one way or the other, we are connected all together. That if you look and at everybody around you, that in some way you're connected to them, they're connected to others. And it's been shown that there are 6 degrees of separation between ourselves and everybody else on the planet. Yeah. So we are all interconnected. We are all one. Now, the idea is, the example of which is the cloud and the piece of paper. That when you look at a cloud and you look at a piece of paper, you don't see a connection. Okay, but if you look at the piece of paper, you can see a cloud floating in it, because without the cloud, there can be no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow. And without trees, we cannot make paper. Yeah, so there's interconnectedness with everything around us. So even though perhaps we're not all in this current pandemic equally, we are all in it together. And to some extent, we are all suffering in some way. So actually to know that you're not alone, you're not the only person shut in your house, you're not the only person who can't go down the pub, you're not the only person that can't go to a party, that actually we all are in the same situation, that does to an extent help a little. So Jerome K. Jerome said, "It is in our faults and failings, not in our virtues, that we touch each other and find sympathy. It is in our follies that we are one." Yeah, so it just means when we allow ourselves to be less than perfect, we actually find that we're on the same level as everybody else, and that we are all perfectly imperfect in everything that we do. We can't be perfect because, as we said before, perfect is always just a little bit more than whatever we just did, right? So in looking at our perfect imperfection, we find we are on a level with everyone else and we are connected to everyone else in the planet. So when we have that situation going on, we can then feel that actually, you know what, this is all right. I can be kind to myself. I don't need to be perfect now. I can see that I have a situation and so does other people, and I can reach out to them because we're all in a situation together and that none of us are perfect. And even if my circumstances don't exactly fit yours, they can be similar or they can be completely different, but we all know what it is to suffer. None of us get through this life without some challenges somewhere along the way. So we all know what it is to suffer. And in that, we find a salve for our pain in other people. So recognizing our humanity. So this was an activity called Challenge Day. And what it involves is looking at a whole list of things that constitute suffering, and then to actually notice when some of them apply to you. So I'm going to just read off a list of things that have been challenging for all sorts of people. I do a lot of coaching and counseling, and these are some of the things that people come to talk to me about. So have a think, listen to my list, and just see. All we need is one of these things to apply to us, to know that we are part of humanity in that we suffer. Okay, so who has at some point in their life felt that some aspect of their physical appearance was judged by others? So maybe you wear glasses, maybe your hair is too curly, too thin, too straight, too blonde, too dark. Maybe we wear glasses, perhaps our teeth aren't straight. Maybe we have more pounds on our body than we'd like, and we feel that other people will judge that. Or maybe we're too skinny. Maybe we can't run fast enough. Maybe somebody said something about us that was untrue. Maybe somebody that we cared about went off and was friends with someone else. Maybe we didn't get the grades we thought we deserved in some work we did. Maybe somebody that we wanted to spend time with us was too busy and we felt rejected. Maybe people left us alone when we wanted their company. All these things, and the list is extensive. I couldn't possibly name them all. But all of these things are reasons why at some point in our life we feel we suffer. But when our sense of self-worth and belonging is grounded in simply being human, we can't be rejected or cast out by others because they're human and we're human. We're still human no matter what somebody else does to us in our life. We are still human. Our humanity can never be taken away from us, no matter how far we fall. The very fact that we are imperfect affirms that we are card-carrying members of the human race and are therefore always automatically connected to the whole. Now, this isn't dependent on how other people treat us. This is just a fact of life. We are human. And so therefore we are connected to others, even those people we are connected to who might do us harm. So the third part of Kristin Neff's model is mindfulness. This refers to the clear seeing and non-judgmental acceptance of what's occurring in the present moment. To give ourselves compassion, we first have to recognize that we are suffering. We can't heal what we can't feel. So when things happen in life that are not what we want, we tend to go into problem-solving mode rather than spending time acknowledging our feelings. If we don't stop to notice our feelings, then our suffering will go unattended and feelings of stress and worry will only mount. We risk getting burned out and exhausted because we are spending all our energy trying to fix external problems without remembering to refresh ourselves internally. Now, for sure, I am guilty of this. As soon as something happens that I'm not happy with, my first thought is, okay, what am I going to do? How can I fix this? Rather than spending time. And so learning about mindfulness for me in my life has often been a case of hitting the pause button at that moment and going, okay, take a moment. How do I feel? And allowing those feelings, because when we allow them, they actually are heard and then subside. And when they subside, it then gives us a lot more opportunity to think clearly about them. What are we going to do? So in that moment, it's about stopping, just waiting a moment and then just going, okay, how do I feel? And then just sit with that feeling and allow it. Because the thing is, if we stuff down our feelings inside, what happens is they need to be heard. So they start to shout louder and louder and louder until they become overwhelming. So that's something that we can notice, that when unpleasant feelings arise, feelings we don't want because something that we don't want has happened, it's about just taking that moment to allow those feelings, to give them attention. You know, if you're doing a mindfulness meditation, it's okay to say, hello, anger. Breathe in, here's anger, and breathe out softness, and just take a moment to give that some attention. And then perhaps that havening technique we talked about earlier might also be helpful. So awareness of awareness, there is only now. Now, this is an interesting concept because we often don't stop to realize this, that our power is in this current moment. The past and the future actually don't exist. They're thoughts, memories, and imagination. So we can take a step back and notice what we are thinking, feeling, and experiencing now. Then you can watch it all without getting lost in the storyline. Yeah? So you can see, okay, right now, I'm feeling disappointed. Didn't get what I wanted. Right. And we can say, actually, you know what? I'm here for you now, Alison. I'm here for your disappointment. I'm here, and it's okay to feel disappointed. And all of those thoughts and all of those ways of talking nicely to ourselves are ways of just helping ourselves to really calm down, to self-soothe, to be kind. Because if somebody else was disappointed, you wouldn't go, never mind, off we go, let's go and do something else. Let's just do, something, or try again. All these things you wouldn't say that to your friend. You would actually say, well, I'm sorry that happened, wouldn't you? And then like that, we can then learn to kind of almost like observe, take a distance from our thoughts, and then we become watching them as if we're almost like watching a film in a cinema, because we can then observe them because we're not trying to change them. If we're not trying to resist our suffering, then all that is left is the suffering. So Haruki Murakami said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Yeah. So if you stub your toe on the bed in the middle of the night, do you just stay present with the pain in your foot? Or do you go, oh, that was really stupid, I should have switched the light on, I can't see where I'm going, of course I'm going to stub my toe. Yeah. Which would be more useful to you in that moment, because for sure, telling yourself you're stupid for not turning the light on in the middle of the night doesn't stop your foot hurting. It might distract you a little bit from the pain in your foot, but it doesn't stop it hurting, and it doesn't tell you what to do about the fact that the foot hurts. Okay, so what we think about our pain has a marked effect on whether we suffer. So do you believe that by accepting pain in your life that you would be giving permission for life to cause you pain? Some people do. They're like, well, if I didn't resist this, then obviously life would just throw a bit more at me. Yeah, some people think that. I don't know if that's true. I doubt it, because who knows what life does. But by accepting the pain is not giving permission for anything else to happen. It's just facing the reality of what is. So next, there's another little activity. And for this, you need a water bottle or something equally heavy, or a book or something, but something that just weighs a little. And what I want you to do is to pick up the water bottle and you hold it out in your right hand horizontally away from your body. All right. Now, this is not something you would normally do because the bottle does become heavy, right? You hold it there until the discomfort becomes overwhelming. And then just as react as you normally would. Suppose you still got to hold that bottle up. So you're going like this, you're holding it up, and your arm starts to get tired after a bit because you're holding it away from your body. Yeah, notice how intense your discomfort is and how long you could hold that bottle out in front of you before you would need to put it down. Okay, and then what I want you to do is to hold the water bottle in your other hand. And this time, as you feel the discomfort, try not to resist it. Just relax around the sensation and allow it just to be. Mindfully note the qualities of the sensation, the burning, the tingling, the tiredness, etc. And as you do so, give yourself compassion for any discomfort you feel. Like, ouch, this hurts. It's difficult to feel this sensation, but it's okay. I'll get through it. Yeah, knowing you're okay will help you to get through it. And you can use this and you can apply it to anything in your life. Like if you want to lose weight and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the munchies hit and you know it's a little while till tea. So you're going to go, am I going to stick with feeling hungry or am I going to hit the biscuit tin? Yeah. So you have a choice always. So it's worth playing with these things to see whether you can maintain your intention not to snack between meals by going, okay, I'm hungry now. Hello, hunger. It's okay to feel hungry and I'll get through it. Yeah, so just pause the video again if you want and then just experiment with those two and see the difference between resistance and acceptance. Okay, there's this lovely prayer that says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay, so by being present in each moment, we are more able to decide what to do in the next moment because we can see with more clarity as our emotions do not cloud our vision. Okay, so some things are within our power to change and some things are not. So there is no point beating ourselves up over things that are completely outside our control because however much we beat ourselves up, they're still not going to change, right? But we can attend to our suffering in that place of saying, okay, it's raining right now and I wanted to go for a walk, right? Rain is outside of my control. I could feel disappointed about not being able to go for a walk with my dog right now because it's raining. And so I could, in that, actually not resist the unhappiness. I can acknowledge my disappointment, and I can also acknowledge that it is completely outside of my control to stop it raining. But what is in my control is that later on, I'm sure it won't be raining and I can go then. Yeah. So, other ideas to help us be more compassionate towards ourselves. We can write a self-compassion journal. So we can write things down and we can write them in such a way as to be kind to ourselves. Writing some words of comfort on cards that you can pull out on the tough days. Now I have this one. I have a big medicine bottle that I had at some point ages ago to have pills. And I put my little pieces of paper in there. And then when I'm having a tricky day and I feel myself feeling judgmental and critical towards myself, I go and look in the box and I pull out some of those words of comfort and I read them. You can meditate on the breath. You can breathe in awareness, breathe out softness. Say hello to your feelings. A statement for times when things are tough is, this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. Now, also, you can do colouring meditations. This is a mandala here, and some people enjoy colouring those, but really any colouring, just something that's going to give you a compassion break. The idea is that you do something that is absorbing of your attention to provide you with a distraction from your difficult thoughts. So if all this is a bit much and you just need to take half an hour out of life to just focus on something that is going to be pleasant, you can do this. And then perhaps things will calm down a bit in that time. And then you'll be able to think more clearly about some of the other interventions that I talked about. Meditation is another idea. Place a picture of a place that helps you to feel safe and at peace. Now, I took this photo on my holiday a couple of years back, and I particularly like it because it was such a peaceful place. Nobody else around, and just the sunshine and the sea for company, and the rest of my family. But but there we were walking down this lovely path to the beach. So you can find that safe place or that picture of that safe place and then meditate using these words. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. And what you do with you're doing this in a meditation is to just read those over and over and over and over and over. Yeah, doesn't matter what speed. You don't have to sit in any particular way. You certainly don't have to do the lotus position, but just sit on a chair or on the floor or lie on a bed or wherever you're comfortable and just repeat those words over and over. Spend time with an animal. Animals are brilliant models of totally accepting of us. They also help us to be present with them as we play with them and pet them. Now, this lovely puppy in the picture is Hugo, and he is my doggy, and he's amazing. You know, you'll never be loved like you're loved by a dog. They're amazing creatures for just following you around in every second of the day. That's why he's called Hugo, because where you go, I go. And as I'm talking to you now, he is sitting on my feet. So he is the picture of love and kindness. So here we are. Compassion is not a virtue. It is a commitment. It is not something we have or don't have. It's something we choose to practice. Now that word, the N word there, is really important. Practice. It's something that we do over and over and over again. And like the picture of the Niagara Falls that you've got here, this is something that has to keep going. Like the Niagara Falls, just continues to fall. You know, unless it freezes over, which it has, but unless it freezes over, there is always water pouring down there. And it's a practice. So one thing that I want you to really understand with self-compassion is that if you decide, okay, I'm going to have a go at this, and then you hear yourself with that inner critic, Don't then criticize the critic. Yeah, because it's a practice. It's something we have to do over and over and to learn. Okay, so consider these questions. What do you think of the above quote? What do you think about the idea that self-compassion is a decision or a commitment? It's not like there's no silver bullet that you can just swallow to be a compassionate person. It's something that you practice and you keep going. It's a decision. This is what I'm going to do for myself. Okay, so this week, how can you actively choose to live your life with more self-compassion? So these are questions that are worth answering. And is there anything that you will commit to doing? Okay, so this could be a really lovely talk, but unless actually we take these practical steps to make commitments and decisions for ourselves, then it's just going to stay a lovely talk. And then it won't actually make a difference to your life unless you decide to commit to doing it and to practicing. So that is the end of the slide presentation.